Then we come to the part, and we did this a little bit on the phone, but especially in person, it's called the close. What is the close? That's where you actually ask for the money, right? And it's called the close in part because that's the end of the conversation. You have nothing, you have put out all your cards. You have nothing else. The end. And it's also called the close because at this point you now really do close your mouth. Right? The next person to speak has to be the prospect. Once I say, do you think you could help us with $1,000? Could you set the pace with $10,000? We need 5. As you can see from our gift range chart, we need 4 people to give $2,500. I think if you were one of them, a lot of people would follow your example. The end. That's it. Don't modify, don't back off. Have some confidence in what you want. So let's think through what might a person say at that moment, and then what would we say back. So do you think you could set the pace with $10,000? What might a person say back then? No. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, let's start with no. All right? Think about it, really. You're in a conversation with a person. From your point of view, now you could be delusional, I don't know you. But from your point of view, the conversation has gone well. You felt like the person was open. You felt like you could say, so could you set the pace with $10,000? And they say no. What are the chances that that is the whole sentence? 0. Here's where you really want to kind of go back here. That the person said no. You have to imagine, every time when a person says no, you have to think to yourself, comma. No, I just can't. I'd love to be the pace setter. That would be sort of fun. But I can't. It's just a little out of my ballpark. Okay, now we have information. Okay? So if I act like what they're saying is literally true, what would I say back at that point? It's just way out of my ballpark.
What is in your ballpark?
Yeah, say what you feel comfortable with. Right, exactly. If I want to try once more for the 10,000, I might say, we don't need it. I don't know if this helps or not. We don't need it all at once. You could pledge it and you could pay it off over the course of the year. I don't know if that helps. I don't want to lock myself into that high of a gift. Well, what feels comfortable to you? Okay, so now 5,000. That's fantastic. I mean, that's practically pace setting itself. Okay, so could you set the pace with 10,000? What's another thing they could say? I'm not the decision maker. Yeah, I can't make that decision. Okay, I need to talk to my wife. Okay, now many times when a person says I need to talk to my spouse, that's what we call in fundraising the shadow question. That this person still has a question, but they feel embarrassed to say it. So they pawn it off on their hapless spouse. Okay? So what you want to do is surface that question. What is the question? Say, I understand that. My partner and I make all our decisions together too. What do you think your wife will want to know? What could I tell you today? What will your wife want to know? Well, she'll want to know why you have to have any paid staff. I mean, you have all volunteers. Why not just do the whole thing with volunteers? You would save so much money. For myself, I understand having paid people, but my wife really doesn't understand that. This is the shadow question, okay? So, and we're going to respond to it. What we have found is that we can do an enormous amount of work with volunteers, and actually we do more work much better with more volunteers when we have paid staff to coordinate and do a lot of stuff behind the scenes that would be very hard to expect a volunteer to do. I really understand. I think your wife is exactly right. In fact, the whole humane movement really runs on the energy of millions and millions of volunteers, and the amount of staff we have over the whole movement is tiny compared to the amount of work that we do. But we really have a lot of evidence to show that our volunteers work more effectively when they're backed up with staff. I've been in it for a long time. After 42 years, if you're not good at something, you should probably just give it a rest. So, but you're going to be really good too, because you're just going to stop and think, okay, what's the answer? Remember, you're anxious, so time is passing very slowly to you. When you're anxious, when you're worried, but they're not anxious, they're not worried, time is just passing. So if somebody says something and you're like, I don't know what to say, I don't know what to say, and you're just, blue circle of death like in your computer, don't worry about it. Just take a deep breath, just sit there, just be calm, just wait for the words to come up. You know what to say. You've done this before. You've given little talks at the Rotary, and you've done this stuff. So what else could a person say? Yeah, check with my financial advisor. Okay. Again, same thing. What will that person want to know? Is there anything I can tell you? Now, here's a couple things that people will say, and I want you to tell me the difference. Do you think you could help with $5,000? That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. Right? Or, do you think you could help with $5,000? Oh, that is not going to be possible. That is out of my range. I don't think I can go that high. What's the difference in those two statements? Those statements are night and day. Very good. One person just wants to be reassured that $5,000 is a lot of money. Anybody, when they say that's a lot of money, or whoa, that's a big gift, or geez, that's a gigantic request, they have the money. But they want to know from you, yes, I realize it's a big request. It is a lot of money. So when somebody says that's a lot of money, don't say, oh, how about less? That's not what they're saying. Do you hear that? That's that listen closely. Make sure you act like what they're saying is literally true. It is a lot of money. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it in person. But someone says, I don't think that's possible. I don't see how I could get that. I'd love to help like that. I'd love to be the person who can help like that. Then we're in a different negotiation. Very good. Okay? All right. Any fears that you have of what people will say when you go to ask them for money? What are your anxieties? All of it? But do you feel you could handle it? I mean, you feel like you could respond? Okay, so here's another way to have practice. Actually, because you're never going to be able to get as much practice as you probably feel comfortable with. Don't go alone. Go with another person, right? Always go with somebody until you feel like you can go by yourself. Maybe some of you will always go with somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. Donors are flattered to be seen by two people. They think, it's great. Two people took time out. Not 3 or 4 or 5 people, but 2 people, okay? And when you go in pairs, one person takes the role of the expert witness. And their job is to know all the facts and statistics and so on. And if it's a staff person, that's the staff person's role, okay? And the other person kind of effuses and enthuses and asks for the money. When you go in pairs, you do have to have an agreement about who's actually going to ask. You have an agreement about who's going to talk. Sometimes you go in pairs and you see one person does all the talking and one person doesn't do any talking. Okay? Then the donor is like, well, what are you doing here, potted plant? I mean, it's kind of... and that doesn't work. So make sure there's some evenness of presentation. But just go in pairs. That will bypass your need for practice. That's just a really good thing. Mm-hmm.
So I know ideally the people we're calling, they like animals, that they're prospects. But say you get someone on a really bad day and they just start attacking you. How do you handle that? Do you hang up? Do you listen to them go off on you? Do you thank them and say you'll call them at another time?
You could do any of those things.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if you really think they're, just like, it seems like I've caught you at a really bad time. I'm really sorry. Sounds like a lot's going on. I mean, some empathetic, you are empathic people. What would you say? What would you say if you called a friend who just went on a rant?
See you later.
Oh, good friend. Remind me not to call you when I'm depressed. Okay. I think most of the time we call a friend who's normally kind of easygoing and kind of chirpy and upbeat, and they go off on something or they pick on something, we say, wow, what's going on? What happened, right? You can do that. Mm-hmm. But don't let yourself be abused. There's no reason for that. I think that's pretty rare, actually, but certainly could happen. The more common thing to me would be if somebody offered you money to do something that you didn't want to do. Okay, well, yeah, I could imagine giving you $10,000. This really happens. I could imagine giving you $10,000, but here's the thing. I am actually about to build a gated community on a little piece of property over on blah blah side of town, and it's going to be this luxury gated community. And the property, the thing is, it's so annoying. These environmentalists are on my butt, but the property does not have any environmental. There's no, rare animals there or anything like that. It's fine, but they're all over me. So what I'd really like to do, I'd like to make the lead gift. I'd like you to make normally I wouldn't ask for a big splash. I'm not that kind of person, but in this particular instance, I'd like you to make a big splash that it was me. And also, if anyone asks you if you support that community, I'd really need you to say yes. So what do you say to that?
25,000.
So that's an option to say we're not that cheap. We need more. These are ethical dilemmas, right? You're not in the property business, you're not in the housing business, so in some ways, whether it's luxury housing or a gated community, you may or may not find that personally offensive, but it has nothing to do with your work, right? But are you really going to take up somebody's cause like that? Or sometimes people will say to you, I love your organization, and my son dropped out of college and is having gotten in with a really bad group of people, and I just am worried to death about him, and I think he would really benefit by being in an organization where he had some sense of purpose. So could he be on your board? So you got to be prepared. Some of you have kids. You know that people with kids will do anything for their kids, even inappropriate. So I have a lot of heart for that. When people say that to me, I actually have a lot of sympathy for them, but I also have to say, that's a really tough position you're in, and it can be a lot of heartache. When we watch our kids who are almost grown up but not quite grown up making bad decisions, is really tough. The way people get on our board is not by just being put on the board, but I can try to look for an internship thing, or we can try to talk about that. I had somebody the other day in this organization I'm working as a lot of young people, really. It's mostly kind of 18 to 30. And this person says to me, who's about, 45 or so, he said, I really want to get in a relationship. I've been really, really lonely. And I know that your organization, there's a lot of really smart, cool people in that organization. And probably I'm thinking because they're young, that a lot of them are single. Could you introduce me? So I was like, no. I said, look, I get it. We've all wanted to be in relationships, and I really get that. And, I don't want to embarrass you, so we're not going to take this conversation any further, but no, that can't happen. So let's come back to the request for money. So you have to be very clear in yourself. That is far more likely they will ask you to do something you don't want to do than that they will hammer on you or be mad at you. Kind of our fantasies of how awful it will be. It was going to be every once in a while, it's going to be awful in a whole different way. And that's what's fun about fundraising. All right, let's see, what time is it? Oh, yes, we do have time. Okay, so this is what I'd like you to do now. Get into groups of 3 without a lot of fussing and noise, okay? Just get into groups of 3. Now, right now. Okay, are you all in a group? All right. So everybody in your group is a 1, a 2, or a 3. And there are a couple groups that have 4, so there'll be 2 3s. Okay, so 1, a 2, or 3. Pick a number. All right. This part isn't the hard part, even. Okay, come back together. All right, pay very close attention, because now the exercise starts. So, number 1. You are the executive director, okay, paid or unpaid, doesn't matter, of the organization that you are actually part of. That's the one we're working with. So who's a 1? Okay, so this is the organization we're working with. Number 2, you are a board member of that organization. Number 3, you are a prospect, and you've agreed to meet, okay, you've agreed to meet to hear more about the group. You've been introduced by a friend. You think you have given some years ago, but nobody's records are very good. So you may or may not have given. And you're going to be asked, let's say for $5,000. Let's make it like a worthwhile thing for fun, okay? So what I want to do right now, I'm going to give the ones and twos about 5 minutes to get ready. And I want all the threes to come out to the hall out there with me, and we're going to talk about being a prospect. Now, before you move, though, let me tell you what's going to happen. After 5 minutes, you're going to come back in. You're going to be solicited. One rule, you cannot say, I don't have the money. For this exercise, you have the money. You don't have to say yes, but you have the money. Okay, so don't use that as an excuse. And you like this organization, right? You've agreed to meet. So you can be as mean as you want, but really think, how mean would you be if you agreed to sit down and have coffee with a group that you liked, okay? You'll have about 12 minutes to finish the solicitation. Is all of that really clear? Everybody clear what number they are? Okay, so all the threes out in the hall with me. Sending the prospects in now, and you're going to have about 12 minutes to ask them. Are you ready? Okay. Okay, so let's kind of think what we learned from doing this exercise. So first of all, I'll say that out there in the hall, we did not come up with any tricks or anything. We just kind of talked about what I asked people to do is think about, and I think this is a really important thing when you practice, being the prospect. Don't pretend to be somebody else. Don't pretend to be your imagination of prospect. Be yourself. Be yourself. I asked them to be themselves with $5,000. I know for some people that was probably more of a stretch than others, but for anybody, you have $5,000 and you can give it to one group or another group. Very few people have many $5,000 gifts, right? So it's not like $25 where you probably have $25 for a lot of groups. We don't have $5,000 for a lot of groups. So when they choose you, they are de facto not choosing something else. And that's very important when you're asking. You realize you're asking, choose me, and de facto not someone else, okay? Because you're not going to have that much money to spread around. So from the prospect's point of view, what did you learn by being a prospect that you'd want to remember for when you are a solicitor? What was that like?
We wanted to say yes, but we wanted to make sure that we wanted to say yes. Like we wanted to know, you know what I'm saying, is we have the money, we want to give it to them, but we want to make sure they were the ones that we wanted to give the money to.
Yeah. I think that a lot of times once a person agrees to meet with you and they know you're going to ask them for money and so on, what they really want is some reassurance. Am I right that you are the right group to give this to? Not so much I have to be talked into giving it, but just, that little extra. Sort of like if any of you have ever gone into a store maybe to buy a camera, let's say, or something that, you don't buy every day. You buy a nice camera or car. Car would be another bigger, higher ticket example. But you may have decided, I want this camera. I read about it in Consumer Reports. This is exactly, it has all the features I want. So you could actually just order it online, and that's what a lot of people do. But if you're more like a lot of us, you actually go into the store because you want the person to sell it to you, right? To name again the features, to make sure you're getting the right thing, And I think that's a little bit what we're doing. Let's name again the features here. All right, what else did you learn by doing this exercise, by being the prospect? Up here?
I really wanted the emotional connection. They had told me about the program, and it's a dental program, which was great. But when she mentioned that there were senior dogs sitting in the shelter in pain because they had dental problems, that's when I was just like, oh, okay.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Right? And as we all know what dental pain is too, so yeah, go ahead.
We were presented with a new adoption center for senior cats, and one thing that really made a difference to me was that she talked about how they would be able to bring in more children, student groups to educate them on the joys of having a senior pet, and that how less stressful it would be for them to not be taking the cats all around the city and having like one location. So for me, I felt like, this is going to make a difference long term. It's not just a one shot, help them do this one event or whatnot. I really saw that it would make a difference in the world of animals.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Any other insights from here's one over here from being a prospect?
They came to me and showed me pictures of the actual dogs that are going to be helped, and then invited me to meet them and be part of that process.
Wow. Okay. Right, good. When you can do that, that's great. When you have something that sells itself. And of course, when it's appropriate, it's not always, when it's appropriate to show people the animals or to take them, the animals do sell themselves, right? I mean, they really do. Any other thoughts from being a prospect? Okay, so let's look at going in pairs. How many of you liked going with somebody else? You thought in real life that would make life so much easier, yeah. That's true for 99% of people. But when you go in pairs, there are some things you have to keep in mind. So one is when you're with somebody else, you have exactly half as much time to talk as if you went by yourself, right? So if you're a chatty person like me, that's like, oh, okay, I gotta have some boundaries here. So let me ask you, what were you glad that you thought of and planned before your prospect came in? And what, in retrospect, do you wish you had planned, or if you were to do this in real life, you think, I would remember to plan this or remember to think of that? So what were you glad you did, and what do you wish you had done? Any thoughts on that in terms of going in pairs to make that experience good? Okay, here comes this person. Oh, here, this person, okay.
So Kylie and I went in together, and what they do is completely different than what we do, but we just made it into one company. So we were able to talk about outreach, which is quite different in a lot of the organizations. They don't do that. But then with Kylie's portion, we were able to kind of bring it all together. So we were providing in-house services, but also the outreach part. And I think that probably helped our what did you call them? Prospects. Yeah, sorry. See, I don't even know what they're called. Anyway, I mean, I don't know if you would think we should have done something.
Well, so it seems like each of you had a role to play and something to say.
Right.
So you both showed up. It wasn't like one person kind of tagged along.
Right, exactly.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's very good. Who's over here? Yes.
I don't know if my comment is actually answering your question, but one thing that I wish we had planned or thought of before was the question that she asked was, if I give you this $5,000 and you don't raise the other 15 you need for this program, what's my $5,000 going to do? And we're like, legit have no idea,
Yes.
which is not a good answer. So that's something we definitely would want to plan ahead for, yeah.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I mean, now looking back on it, you probably think, why didn't we think of that? But we often don't. But really, the gift is part of a larger goal. The donor will often say, and what happens if you don't raise the money, right? And so you have to have an answer for that. What might be some answers for that?
What would you like us to do?
Well, yeah, okay, you could say that, yeah. I think that would cause some insecurity on the part of the donor. You might say, we'll just postpone, we'll just delay doing the capital improvement until we have the money. You could say, if it's capital, we'll borrow the money from the bank and pay it back, because it's very, very important that it gets done. See, if you're going to kind of say to people, we have to get this done, it's very urgent, there are animals right now in pain, and then you're like, well, but then we'll postpone. That doesn't, so you have to have a backup plan. And really borrowing the money sometimes can be a backup plan. Or you could say, you know what, I'm very confident we'll be able to do it. But I'll tell you what, why don't you pledge, if you feel comfortable with this, why don't you pledge the $5,000, and when we're at $45,000, I'll let you know. And then you can pay it then. And if we don't get to $45,000, you don't pay your pledge. That reassures the donors completely. And generally, because you're so confident, they'll just say, oh, here, you can have it, right? So that's that negotiation. Stay in that negotiation, that negotiating posture. Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the accounting side of me. Funds like that are called restricted funds, and so you cannot spend that money on anything but what they're giving it to you for.
Unless they say you can.
Yeah, that's just, yes. You have to have it down in writing. It's a very safe way to do it that way. So you can always promise them that these are restricted funds. They will sit, and the funds will add up, like you were saying.
Right.
And because I don't know, years ago, I remember one instance where we didn't have the full amount, and they said, okay, then I'll just pledge it in, and then we never got the money from that pledge either. So,
well, this is you're raising actually another issue which we haven't talked about, which is called bad pledges. So anytime in any campaign you want to plan and then pray to God it doesn't happen. But you want to plan that you won't collect 10% of what's pledged to you. That's called the bad pledge rate. So people will either forget, or the day they move, this happens a lot, the day they move their stock, it was a certain amount in the morning when they called, and by the time it got sold in the afternoon, it was less. And there's a lot of reasons. It's not always that the donor was a jerk. It's that, sometimes something else happened. But if you need $50,000 and you absolutely need $50,000 and not one penny less, you would want to raise $55,000. Some campaigns go through and they have no bad pledge at all. But I was with a campaign one time. We had only one bad $10 million campaign, so pretty large, and we only had one bad pledge. Everybody else paid completely, on time, everything. But the bad pledge was $500,000. It's a lot. So that can kill you. All right, anything else you learned by doing this exercise that you want to share?
Just when we were discussing the kind of selling point for ours, we were talking about getting a transport vehicle for her rescue operation. And one of the things that we kind of talked about afterwards was that it wasn't that exciting to the prospect because he didn't really understand why it would be what it was. So kind of having taking a step outside of yourself and taking a step outside of your perspective and saying, okay, well, I know it's exciting because 50 dogs are going to be on that transport van that are going to have their lives saved, but to somebody who doesn't know the ins and outs of the day-to-day, they're going to say, it's a van. What's exciting about a van? So making sure that, that just because you're excited about something, making sure that, running it by other people outside of your circle and saying, does this sound exciting to you? Do you understand why this is exciting? And if not, switching your story up and maybe, maybe creating a more personalized story, maybe, talking about like one specific animal that was saved because of this van or something like that, just making that story more exciting to somebody who doesn't understand why a truck or van would be exciting.
Yeah.
So.
I think your suggestion of really sometimes running your idea by your pitch by some other person, just like we did today. There was nothing at stake today. Nothing was going to happen. But you get some feedback, I think is really good. Yeah. Because I think it's true. We can be very, this is so exciting. I can see it, and people are like, well, I don't really get it. But again, always coming back to something that was said over here, always coming back to telling the story from the point of view of the animal, right? From the point of view of the client. What's you're not doing a van in order to keep the van company in business or in order to employ a van driver. We're not an employment project. We're doing it because otherwise these animals, what will happen to them if they are not transported, right? And the story of one animal is always more powerful than the story of 50 animals. 50 animals is a statistic. One animal is a story, right? And you see that over and over. You saw that, I think, most recently in the last few years, the plight of Syrian refugees, which I think we'd read about, you heard about, but you can hardly, if you're not a person who follows this very close, you're like Syrian, but there's also Yemeni, but there's also, I can't keep up with all the Rohingya, I can't keep up with all the refugees. But then, what was the thing that crystallized the plight of the Syrian refugees? Was that little boy who was dead on the beach. I mean, that was like one of the most powerful pictures, really, people are saying it's one of the most powerful pictures since, for years. That would be like, oh my God, okay, this is actually what it means to have thousands of people fleeing this one little person. So those stories are very, very important.
I have a question. While I was listening to the ask, if you will, I was also thinking about if I were going to be doing this, and do you recommend starting specific and then building out, or starting general and then moving into the specific? Or
I would recommend asking the person what they know about the organization, because otherwise you don't know what. I mean, if they've never heard of you, if they're just meeting with you because their friend Tom said it's a great group, you should meet with them. You're gonna have to start at a bigger picture and move in. But if they know a lot and they've been involved in humane work for a long time and Tom has told them a lot about you, then you can skip that and move. So really the questions are what will establish that. Yeah. But that's a very good question. Any other thing? Yeah, over here. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, just shout. I'll repeat it. Yeah, it's a little awkward, and most donors won't quite ask it quite that straightforwardly. Will I get something for my money? Will I get a plaque? So if you want to, if you have a donor wall, or if you have some way of honoring them or some way of mentioning them, to say, and what we'd really like, and I know sometimes, and I think what's kind of nice is to hand them something at that point. I know some people don't like this, they want to, but it really helps us to be able to feature our donors. It gives confidence to other donors. So I'd love to have your name on our donor wall, if you have that. I wouldn't create a donor wall just for that reason. I don't think that many donors would not give. They're kind of like, they'd like it, but it's okay if you don't. So don't turn yourself into a pretzel and don't feel you have to hand donors a whole lot of stuff. A lot of donors are very concerned that as much money as possible goes to the thing and not to rewarding them. So you're walking that line too. Okay, so I hope you'll practice this. I think practice is very, very important, and I think you can get a sense of it. Is there anything now you'd want to say? Could you imagine doing this now? Doesn't have to be your favorite thing. What would hold you back now from calling tomorrow and trying to set up a meeting with a prospective donor? What would keep you from doing that right now? What would keep you from calling tomorrow, okay, not next month, tomorrow, and setting up a meeting with a prospective donor? Okay, getting your pitch together. That's a legitimate thing. What else? Yeah. That's a little bit Sean was talking about, moving to what's important, away from what's urgent. A lot of urgent stuff is not important. Okay? Stephen Covey had this quadrant, probably a lot of you know. I think he was from here, right? So Covey would say every task falls into a quadrant. It's urgent. There's urgent, important, not important. Every task is in one or two of those quadrants. And many of us in nonprofit life, we spend our life in the urgent, not important quadrants. You want to spend your life in the important quadrant. Some things are important, are urgent, and many things, particularly major donors, are important and they are not urgent. Right? So that's kind of some time management stuff there is really, really important. So I'm thinking that not much will stop you from doing this, so I'm hoping that tomorrow you will actually make an appointment. It could be with a friend. Doesn't have to be for an ask, but you just get sort of like flossing your teeth or exercise or something. You just start doing it and you say, I'm going to do it every day, and pretty soon you do it every day, right? I mean, we know this from, I have for years been told by my friends, I live in Berkeley, right, which is like the home of beautiful people who exercise all the time and eat only, 4 lettuce leaves. And so they would say, Kim, if you would exercise every day, there would come a day when your body would rather exercise than not exercise. This is what people always tell me. And I would always think it must have quit the day before that was going to happen. That never happened that I ever wanted to exercise. But then I got a dog. We rescued these puppies. And, of course, they had to be walked every day. And I loved them so much. And then one day I got up and I realized I was actually not just looking forward to walking with the dog. I was actually looking forward to walking. Right? And it was kind of an interesting thing. So that's the nature of this kind of stuff. Like, this from animals. You do stuff every day. And you're consistent every day, particularly with dogs. You're consistent every day with how you treat them. Well, the same is true with your donors. Every day you have a donor you're going to call. Or 3 days a week you have a donor you're going to call. It's kind of, you just make it a discipline. Because you kid yourself if you say, I'm going to do it all in the month of June. That's not, June is a wide open month. Yeah, June's a wide open month now. Because it's only March. Okay. All right. But this is what I want you to think about when you go back to your organization. What is your action plan? Do you need to rethink any of your strategies? A couple people talked about their galas. Maybe getting somebody else to do them. Maybe giving them up altogether. Are your events really working for you? Don't do them if they're not. You need to rethink your social media. Are you putting too much time into it to no purpose, or do you need to do it in a different way? So be very clear about that. What are the next steps with the board and volunteers so you can actually distribute this fundraising over a wide group of people? That you can actually have a team. Do you actually think if I got hit by a bus, God forbid, this organization could continue? Or perhaps I could even take a vacation right? Something like that would be very nice. And then, of course, I think this has to be a top priority. We do a lot. I see organizations over and over and over, and they do a ton for donors, and they build a donor base, and the donors are very happy, and you have great thank you notes, and they have good records, and they have nice events, they have good materials, they have a great website, they have all that. And then they never ask any of those people in person. And to me, it's a little bit like you planted the garden, you watered it, you fed it, and then you never harvested it. Like, why? You know, these people are all sitting there waiting for you, and inevitably someone else comes along and gets all the money. So just take a minute right now, and by yourselves, I want to write down, what is one thing you're going to do now, not necessarily now, today, Wednesday, or Thursday, I mean, but tomorrow or Monday. What are you going to do to really reinforce? I flatter myself that you learned something, but if you did learn something today, what are you going to do to reinforce what you learned in the next couple of days, okay? In the next few days. So just take by yourself just a couple ideas, and then we'll get some feedback on that. All right, let's just get a couple ideas from this side of the room. Oh, okay, Toastmasters. Right. If you belong to Toastmasters, that's a great audience, and that's a lot of the point of that. You'll get a lot of good tips. You're going to practice the ask in front of Toastmasters. Excellent plan. One more from this side. All right, put together a goal. Get a goal so you know what you're actually aiming for. Otherwise, you'll never be able to measure. 2 from this side. Yeah, get some language going. What are the stories? What are the accomplishments? What are the goals going forward? Right? Very good. One more.
I want to go back and create that message fact sheet for all of our stakeholders internally.
Yeah. Put together that message of, with the questions that we had, that everybody has it, that they keep it, that they memorize it, and you figure out some way to drill them on it so you really know how you're being represented by your groups going forward. So, I'm going to end now. This has been really, really fun. I have so enjoyed all of you, and I really wish you well. You're doing such important work. And actually, I don't say this in all my trainings, but I actually think you're going to do very, very, very well. So, and I want to thank Diane. Maddie's fun, and you made network.